Live for Medicarians. This is trial run here.
Always live. We'll see how this goes. We're recording, right?
All right, fantastic.
You can hear the audio in the background. That's how you know it's real, authentic, live.
Business.
Now we can clean it up in post, right? So let's not worry about it.
I don't know if that's how it works.
Yeah, we'll see.
Hey, happy to have back with us one of our favorite guests we've ever had, one of our renowned guests, Grace. If you want to maybe reintroduce yourself briefly.
Sure. No, happy to be back here. Thrilled and really enjoyed the experience the first time. So Grace Totman, I co-lead and I'm a director on the healthcare team at Capstone based in Washington, D.C. Policy consultants. We primarily work with institutional investors and then also companies in the healthcare space more broadly. So glad to be back and live version.
Honestly, there's a lot that's changed in it was about a year ago when we kind of cut our first one.
Hey, the good news is we're all still in business, right? I mean, we're still in business. You're still around. There's still a need for you.
Yep.
Still a need for us.
We survived. Yeah. Right, another year. So, but, ton of updates. And actually, Grace, you're going to have to run here in a few minutes because you're on, 2-3 panels?
Yeah, busy conference. It's good.
Okay, perfect. So what's the agenda of the day? What are you kind of sitting on? What are you kind of going through today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, we're in the peak of rulemaking season in DC. So we've got 2 Medicare Advantage rules that are sitting at OMB under review. Those are probably coming out in the next 2 weeks. So very exciting time in the MA space. You've got, the new administration still very much getting up and running. We saw Oz's confirmation hearing last week, which we should probably talk about.
Yeah. Yep.
And then you've got craziness in the ACA world. Will they or won't they extend these enhanced subsidies? There's conversations about Medicaid cuts that would actually implicate the ACA and the exchanges. So busy time, job security, but it still feels like there's not a dull day in DC these days.
Right. And did I hear right that we do have maybe, a call letter coming next week?
We do, yeah. So April 7th, the first Monday in April, is the statutory deadline for the rate notice to come. And then probably more applicable for the crowd here is the policy and technical reg, which would be what includes any distribution-related provisions. So back to that 24 proposed rule. And that should be, although they probably in 2 to 3 weeks.
Yep. So for those insurance nerds, those geeks out there, there's going to be a lot of material.
Yep.
Probably in the next 2 to 3 weeks between the call letter and everything else you mentioned. Probably, I don't know, 1,500 to 3,000 pages of documents to kind of comb through.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll be putting some AI to work this year to kind of comb through some of the highlights, but I'm sure there's going to be a ton to go over here. What are you already looking at in there? What is your gut telling you, reading through the tea leaves? I mean, we're all looking at the new administration, and we're kind of more, just to kind of set the stage for everybody listening, that call letter is almost going to set the tone for, here's the objectives, here's the directives, here's what administration wants to accomplish. Very significant and impactful things. That's what we're really looking for next week, right?
I think that's right, but I think the caveat or maybe the cautionary word that I would put in there is that we often see almost a holdover year when a new administration first takes effect. In the first time around, the Biden administration, right, very famous for cutting MA rates and being very negative for MA, but that first year in office was a 5% annual payment update.
Yeah.
Because it was overhanging from the first administration. So I say that to say it's very possible that we see this rule as, what's to come. It's also very possible that it's a little bit of an overhang. And so if it's negative in any way, shape, or form, I don't think I'd jump to the conclusion that this administration is going to be more of the same. I think I would, pause for a second and say, okay, it's very possible that this rule has been written, that it was written by the last administration, that the transition team, who's very much still in flux, didn't have much time to amend that, and that's what we're seeing here.
Good call.
So I think it's a good kind of caveat to put out there.
Okay. Yeah, good call. It's there's only so much time, and as we've kind of seen from an administrative perspective, everything's so focused on, Doge, so to speak. I mean, that's been these high-level, macro-level cuts, in all these different departments, and it's sad to say that, the CMS call letter for our industry is not the top of their to-do list, right? And to your point, I mean, putting that top-down, new leadership in and all those directives, it is probably going to take a full year or longer, I'm sure.
And even in the last 48 hours, right, we've seen another 10,000 individuals subject to a reduction in force in HHS. So there's not as many people in there actually doing the rulemaking and promulgating the regulation as there typically is.
I, for one, am okay with less people to make more rules for a minute. Like, just like to slow that roll just a little bit. It got to the point where now we have so many people there. We've grown like that body of government, and we've also grown with technology, and it's like really exacerbated the number of rules, and rulemaking process has become so cumbersome over the last 2-3 years that, I, for one, am okay with like, let's roll that back 10%. Let's like have that pendulum swing back a little bit,
Yeah, when you talked about, the two rules on the Medicare side of things that we're waiting to get clarification on, remind everybody what we're referring to.
Yeah, so the first one, the call letter, is essentially just the annual payment update for Medicare Advantage. And so CMS will tell us how much more the carriers are going to get on a per member basis, which has immediate flow through for distribution partners as we think about just how cash rich those carriers are. And then the second one is the policy and technical changes rule. And this one is really specifically about kind of non-rate related regulation. And so that includes things like distribution payments and the rule that's, still being litigated that I think we talked about extensively the last time, that would have tried to cap commission payments and would have looked at things like HRAs and overrides. That was done via policy and technical changes. Now, there's some speculation going on out here that you could revisit that in this rule, but that litigation is still active. And so I think I tend to be in the camp of this policy and technical changes rule is relatively benign. You see what happens in court, and then you revisit it if you need to. But I think what's interesting, we were just talking about this before we went live, is that we've already seen signs that this administration is not the first administration.
Yeah.
And that it's also not a traditionally administration. I mean, Dr. Oz in his confirmation hearing was asked if there are problems in MA, what's the number one problem in MA? And he said without hesitation, Medicare Advantage sales. So I do think there's a nuance to some of this policy and kind of support for it.
So what would you assume he's referring to when he, and we know we talked a little bit about the hearing before, but what are some of the changes that we may be looking out for specifically related to the MA as he takes office?
So despite his comments, I tend to think that we're still very much looking at a more positive environment because of the deregulation.
Yep.
Because I think the theme of even reductions in force and cutting fraud, waste, and abuse means deregulation in a lot of senses. That being said, I could see more attention on broader oversight. What are the specific, bad actor issues that we're having in the distribution space? And I know you and I have talked about this extensively. And how can we better go after those? You have this at the same time as congressional attention. So Wyden put out his findings of his investigation after years of looking into the distribution space last week. I think all of it, candidly, is still a little bit benign and doesn't quite understand the space in a way that it probably needs to, which is part of the reason that I'm not worried.
Right.
Is because you still don't have understanding in the way that you need to before you can actually do policy making that would be impactful.
Well, and I had interesting conversations last night, some of the who's in the industry, and we were talking about well, where did this kind of really stem from? And obviously, how did regulators, after all these years, and we've had Medicare Advantage really predominantly being sold since 2006 or 7, for 20 years it's been sold, and suddenly, after 20 years, regulators just really got keyed in on broker and distribution compensation. And a lot of, where did this stem from, and for what motivation and for whom? And that we had a lot of conversation about that last night. So it's interesting.
I think there's a bunch of different factors there. I mean, one, Medicare Advantage is more than 50% of the total Medicare program. And I think for a while, if the goal is let's get this program to be really big and let's get seniors interested in this, once you hit that 50% threshold, you start asking different questions, right?
Yeah.
And now you're saying, okay, now how can we tweak it? What are the problems? What do we need to fix? And then two, it's no secret that Democratic lawmakers have not been the biggest fans of MA from its inception.
Yeah.
Right.
And as you've seen more and more investor involvement, private industry involvement in the space, I think that has only piqued their interest even more. And then finally, I think there's a session later today called, brokers have a reputation problem. And I think that that's very true as well. We talk so much in what I do about things that matter politically and things that resonate politically. one of the things that resonates politically right now is seniors calling their lawmakers and saying, I'm getting 50 calls a day.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Or, the mailers won't stop coming. People are bothering my daughter. People are bothering my son. That is something that very much resonates with people in DC. And I think it's kind of the culmination of all of those things that have created this, call it what you will, reputation problem for brokers and agents right now.
Right. We talked about that. And a lot of it is a result of how difficult it is because of the rulemaking to actually go to market, right? And restrictions around that. And so one of those results, in fact, we talked about it last week on our podcast, is one of those results is unfortunately that bombardment, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And seniors getting, clicking on something and opting into essentially everything under the sun. And then they're just stuck in this death spiral of like these lead vendors. And it's legal for most of them. It's what they've done is completely legal for the vendors to get their information and recirculate them multiple times. Yeah. There were some, obviously changes on one-to-one to kind of curb that a little bit, but I think most of those efforts have really not shown big results yet. And so I think that we talk about, again, that whole frustrating environment for those seniors is due to a lot of the regulation in place right now.
Yeah, one of the things I've been talking about, and I've been kind of getting testy a little bit on LinkedIn with some people, I don't know if you've seen, is there seems to be this new weird alliance between anti-broker regulators and legislators and the new tech bros that are trying to sell AI or SaaS solution as like a enrollment solution, as if that's part of the problem, And I'm sitting there going, where is this? Why are you entering this space? And it's like my kids say, entering the chat. And I'm like, why is this company entering the chat on brokers and regulation in the industry? And I'm like, oh, you're building an enrollment SaaS tool, with AI to try to replace brokers, with an agnostic big tech stack.
Right.
So I don't know if you're seeing any of that as well.
Yeah, I think that's the interesting thing about this administration, hiring a lot of people from industry, right? Which on the one hand, I think it protects everyone from accidental policymaking where we don't quite realize how the business works. And then all of a sudden there's a major unintended consequence. Not in this space, but there was something very similar in the Medicare Advantage space in the risk adjustment world where this massive model was dropped. No one realized what the implications were going to be. And it ended up causing a lot of providers to go bankrupt, which was not the intention. I think the risk of something like that happening is much lower because of all of the industry involvement. But the risk of biased policymaking, the risk of policymaking that's specifically trying to advance or decelerate a certain industry, whether it's AI or tech-enabled distribution partners, is much higher.
Yeah.
And it's this trade-off, right? Where which world would we rather be in? I still think, all of this being said, we're in a better world today than we were 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Just given the more kind of pro-industry, the more pro-senior, pro-Medicare Advantage more broadly, and kind of private Medicare policy dynamic, even with everything that we just talked about. But I think that's the risk.
I would completely agree, and I think that you're right that at least conceptually some of the fight for, hey, distribution, brokers, selling to consumers, everything's felt in the last 2 years very uncertain, right? Yep. To where sentiment is like, oh, I don't know, like everything's a threat, and are we going to make it out of this okay? I think I'm settling with the sentiment that overall carriers, policymakers, regulators are understanding that distribution and brokers are here to stay. Mm-hmm. So there's some certainty and comfort in that. But it's like, what does that look like, though, now? And I do think that there's still going to be, obviously, changes to how brokers are maybe compensated or what that model looks like, or distributors. But I don't think it's largely a question of, are you going to exist in it?
Completely agree.
Hey, I have a question about, you're pretty plugged in to the Hill, to the DC side of things with so many people getting let go from HHS. What's the mood or the environment like in the DC area amongst that ecosystem there? Is it excitement? Is there terror? Like, what's the general mood like in that area?
It's definitely not excitement. I mean, I would say it's volatile.
Right.
Living in DC, and I live in DC proper, after any election, 40% of the city up and moves. Mm-hmm. And so it's already quite volatile.
So it's legitimate. It's not rumors.
No, not at all.
Wow.
And despite what I do, I actually have very few friends or family in politics. So I'm a little bit insulated. But especially right now, you combine an election, a very politicized election, with very intentional reductions in force and DOGE, and it's very volatile. It's, we're hiring.
So there is a lot. You're hiring. Yeah. So there is a lot of uncertainty on the Hill then. So
a ton of uncertainty.
yeah.
Yeah. So is there anything that, your wish list, of things that you were saying like, hey, I would like to see from this administration, or things that I think would be good or positive for the industry at large? If you had your wish list, what are the couple of things that you would like to see over the next couple of weeks?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it sounds a bit crazy to say, but I think more of what we've been seeing in a very active conversation with industry. Say what you will about this administration, say what you will about what they're doing, about the reductions in force, but a lot of the new officials in HHS and in the regulatory bodies that matter to this industry have been very active in going out and saying, we know that we don't know a lot, and we want to have conversations, and we want to learn, and we want to talk to people. And I think that as long as that continues to happen, which is my assumption, that we're not going to have nearly as volatile or am I going to exist fear over the next 4 years, which I think is the best thing possible for you guys, for me, for everyone here.
Yeah, and I heard resoundingly, and this is not just from one conversation that I've had. This is maybe 10 different conversations that I've heard from carriers, people who do bids, people who work at carriers and do government affairs.
Yeah.
And they're all saying, you know what, and this is not to, divide the line in politics, but they're saying this administration is listening, and there's a dialogue, and we're able to communicate, and we're able to convey the challenges, and they're trying to understand and dig deeper and solve the issues. Whereas the last administration, I've said it many times, is very tone deaf. Just kind of like, hey, here's all these problems. It's like, here's 300 more pages, and it was just like, commenter said this, we don't care what commenter said. There was just there was not, I don't think, a constructive relationship there with, private sector in the industry with the prior administration.
Yeah, I mean, I think politics aside, it's funny from my seat, anecdotally, we've never had this level of access to lawmakers, which is incredible, right?
Yeah.
To be able to have that dialogue and have those conversations and really have it be almost a partnership. And look, we don't lobby, we don't have skin in the game, we don't have a horse in the race, but even just the ability to have those conversations and to say, well, here's how are you thinking about it? And here's how we think about it. The level of access is unparalleled. And I think that has been really refreshing to see. That dialogue is very much active in DC right now.
Good.
I love it. I'd like to know, you got to run here in a minute, but what is one potential issue that you're really watching right now? And then what's a Grace bold prediction, that you see happening that you'd like to sign your name to?
Ooh, all right. Tough question. I would say we spent a lot of time talking about Medicare.
Uh-huh.
If we can talk about the ACA for a quick
Please.
second. Obviously, a lot of the enrollment growth and success that we've seen on the exchanges over the last couple of years has been the enhanced subsidies.
Yep.
They're set to expire at the end of 2025. I am taking they get expanded. And I know
Okay.
that's
What was
somewhat-
As they are?
Not as they are.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't hear that part.
They get expanded.
Okay.
I'm taking
Okay.
I'm taking that line. I don't think as they are. I think they'll probably restore the 400% FPL cap, but keep the generosity across the board, which based on my projection,
In exchange or in a trade for what? The
It always gets done, right?
cut.
tax cuts? Yep.
Yeah,
Tax cuts.
exactly. Because honestly, does have a majority right now, but it's thin, right? Especially in the House,
Very
it's
thin.
a couple seats is all. And candidly, there's a couple of them that they all want to, they have their pet projects, they have their objectives, and so there's a couple holdouts that want something, and they do have to make a deal, so to speak. So.
And I think what people are ignoring, 42% of ACA enrollees are in Georgia, Texas, Florida.
Oh,
That's only 19% of the U.S.
I'd never heard that statistic
wow.
before. Had you?
That's why I said, wow, that blew
Yeah.
my mind, to be honest with you.
They have double exposure.
Hey, aren't those also the highest states with
Sure.
FFM PMPMs? I think they are.
Well, yeah.
And a major base.
Yeah.
Hey, looking bases.
Yeah,
Hey.
you know what else is interesting before that, too? I had a conversation last night with a major national carrier on the ACA side, and they told us that they're anticipating that today, what is it, the first today?
Yeah.
That they were anticipating losing 250,000 lives today.
Wow.
Just because of the change in rulemaking.
rule.
Yeah, obviously, to going away from the zero premium, they want to have $10 or higher. And just the amount of those $0 subsidy plans there's just such a large number that they're not going to be able to track down, get them on a premium-based plan. And they were anticipating 250,000, which blew my mind, to be honest.
And I think in addition to the ACA subsidies being partially enhanced, which will limit enrollment losses there, you're also going to see people coming off of Medicaid because of the Medicaid cuts that are being discussed, that I think some of whom, even if we're assuming a conservative 20%, end up on the ACA, you're going to be in a much healthier enrollment environment on the exchanges than I think people expect.
Yeah, I think we're all for that. I think you're right on. I would expect that to happen as well, that they're continued, the subsidies are continued in some form or fashion, pretty close to what they are now. Not quite as aggressive, but as a trade-off for most likely tax cuts. I think
candidly, like, we all agree that it's better for the system, so to speak, to have fewer enrollments but are actually paying a premium. They're actually humans who had a conversation with somebody, or they actually went online and self-enrolled in a plan and chose it, rather than somebody got their information and enrolled them into something they never even wanted or changed their plan.
Engaged.
Right, that they actually did a part of that purchasing or buying process. So I think I'll take the lower numbers with the better quality and a lot more stability, which is what we're really trying to achieve, I think, with some of this rulemaking going into effect.
Absolutely. Well, Grace, we got to wrap up. Do you have any last bold predictions you want to get out there? Or was that your bold prediction?
That's maybe it's not so bold. You agree with me, but
yeah.
No, I think that's my big one. I think, look, the noise isn't going away. There's going to continue to be a lot of action.
Are you bullish on our industry, on Medicare and ACA?
Of course.
All right. I love it.
I would continue to say before we wrap too, is I am really bullish. Like,
same.
Again, we've talked about it a lot. Like, even the last 2 days, it's like we're geeks and we have these conversations all day, every day for 3 days. And it's, there's some rulemaking going into effect on both sides, on the Medicare and ACA, that is going to kind of squeeze out like the marketers, so to speak, in the industry.
Yeah.
And when there's not fast money and it's not quick, and it's suddenly like, oh no, you have to be an actual health insurance agent or agency who actually understand the business and actually help people with their health insurance rather than I'm a marketer. I think some of that will continue to kind of squeeze out of the ecosystem this year as things become a little bit more challenging. But again, tougher barrier to entry. There's easy money for those marketers to make somewhere else.
Great.
So. I love it. Hey, thank you for your time. Good luck on your panels, and always great to see you.
Sure, I'll see you guys around.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks, guys.
Sounds good. Thanks, Grace.